Cheers.
So my final guest this evening is Richard Woodward from the Blue Monday podcast of Ipswich Town. Rich, thanks so much for joining us. Similar to theme to Southampton, a bit of an undercooked start from Ipswich Town. My personal view is, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think player for player, this group of players is actually better than the one that won back-to-back promotions, but you don't have the same dynamics and synergy sort of established. So, for instance, I would say Jaden Philogene is a better player than Nathan Broadhead individually, but Broadhead had the relationship with Leif Davis, he had the relationship with Connor Chaplin, and it's those sorts of things that might take a little bit of time.
Yeah, spot on, and that is across the pitch, Gab. And today, I just to explain why I'm wearing a Leamington shirt. This is as close to yellow as I'm permitted as an Ipswich fan to wear, and it's deadline day, so I had to wear yellow. So that's to explain that. But we are letting really experienced, really key members of that double promotion team leave today. Wolfwood is expected to go. Chaplin is expected to go. A lot of corporate IQ, as you'd kind of call it, or knowledge of Kieran McKenna ball, as the cliche goes, has left the club this summer. Sam Morsey, certainly in him as the captain, Cam Burgess, Mas Luongo, the guys who have been there and done that, Gab, and know how to play McKenna's style, they're not here anymore. They've gone. Broadhead is another one. And we are starting to see a few green shoots that the players coming in are starting to figure it out, but it is going to take time. And unfortunately, when you start spending the sums of money that we have this transfer window, the expectation is there regardless. And it's a real pressure time for McKenna to get his ideas out and across and into these new players. And yeah, I mean, we're hoping that happens, but it's not been great so far.
Yeah, absolutely. My understanding of it, Rich, from the first 4 games is that the defence looks solid enough in general, although there has been 1 or 2 errors, of course. I would say in the main, taking away maybe some isolated errors, the midfield, there are signs of promise with that partnership of Jens and Azor. But I think, I think in the attack, that's where it's yet to really click, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. I'd be a bit harsher. I would say that we have made some really catastrophic mistakes at the back, or we have been just absolutely ruthlessly punished whenever we've made mistakes. And keeping clean sheets is a real problem for us at the moment. And we've got essentially that Carlos Corberó and West Brom back line. We've got Alex Palmer, Dara O'Shea, and sadly for Connor Townsend, he's injured. Darnell Furlong's come in, Cedric Keepray's come in, and you'd think we'd be resilient as anything and, be you shall not pass. But we just have a brain fart in us, whether it's giving away a penalty or someone pretending they're peak Franz Beckenbauer and dropping possession and us being counterattacked against. And when we're not scoring, the best way to just get that point or even convert a 1-0 into a 3 points is just to shut up shop. We can't do that at the moment, Gab. It's a real problem for us. And that's probably, I'd say as big a concern for me as the attacking line. The goals will come eventually. We're just a bit lacking in confidence. That Premier League relegation being pummeled every week has really affected us. But the quality is there. Sam Smodic will eventually hit the back of the net. George Hurst will eventually hit the back of the net. But if we are too leaky at the back, then all of our hard work is going to be undermined. And it does have a real sense of when we were toiling in League One, Gab. When McKenna first came in, he had to really figure out a strategy. And Derby and Preston, 2 weeks in a row, have proven that if you get a goal or 2 goals against Ipswich on the break and sit in, you can get results, whether that's a draw or a win. And so McKenna really has to go back to the drawing board and kind of treat it like we treated that League One season, because otherwise teams are just going to know they can turn up to Portman Road, sit in, pounce on an error, score, Ipswich will fold, and you've got a point, maybe even 3. And that was the situation certainly over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. One solution that I think is going to be really helpful for Ipswich is making sure that not only are the players of a certain level that you bring in, but they also fit in to a really specific role. So one thing I do actually quite like about the Casey McAteer signing is that while I think you might have better wingers in the squad in terms of individual skill, like Jaden Philogene or Jack Clark, I do think, though, that somebody like Casey McAteer can bring that industry, that selflessness, something that, similar to what Wes Burns has brought when fit. And I'm hopeful that that's going to help the dynamic of the team and how it all kind of spreads out. Just wondering what you've seen from Casey McAteer so far and whether you share my optimism around that signing.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that there's a bit of trepidation in respect of the fee. I think we've definitely paid the kind of local player or parachute rival tax to bring him to Ipswich. So I think that isn't in his favour, but I agree with you. I like his physical stature, actually. He's quite tall, much taller than I thought, and does feel much more suited to the kind of right side role that McKenna favours, which is you do need to get up the pitch, but you also need to get back and support the right back as well. And now we've lost Axel Tuanzebe. That's all the more important. I think the last couple of games, obviously it was a second half cameo for Preston, played most of the game from the start against Derby and has got in, and it's just that final ball, Gab, that's the problem. But again, that comes with confidence, that comes with knowing where his fellow attackers are going to be, and therefore I share your optimism that I think he's an orthodox right winger in that role. A lot of people talked about Tom Fellows. We've definitely been linked with him and whether we should have gone for him instead, but I like this move. As let's say, the fee doesn't help the fact that Southampton got him Fellows for 10 mil, but I do think that McKenna will make a player of him. And the great thing is that Wes Burns, through the probably the autumn into winter, will come back from injury. And then you've got Burns and McAteer, and you've also got our Norwegian Wunderkind, Sindre Vala Egeli, who's signed for a championship record fee, who can play off the right-hand side as well. So you kind of bring him in like we brought in Amari Hutchinson in 23-24. There's some really good options there, but it's McAteer's shirt right now.
I felt, Rich, as though the prevailing vibe among the Ipswich fan base is a mixture of mild concern with a healthy dollop of patience, of course, given what's been achieved. Where are you on that kind of scale, or on that sort of spectrum, if you like, between patient and mildly concerned?
I'm always I'm far too old to be panicking, Gab. I've seen too much football to know that things never stay the same forever. And that's the big emotion. As I said, a yellow shirt transfer deadline day. There are some really major departures happening today, and a lot of people are getting a bit excited about it, and not in a good way. And notionally, it's sad to see this double promotion team be disbanded in the way that it is quite rapidly, but actually you've got to evolve, you've got to move on. And as much as we would love Luke Wolfenden and Connor Chaplin to stick around, they're not starting games. They're not able to contribute. I think Wolfie's probably the most harshest, treated in that respect, because, as I say, I don't think Dara O'Shea, J. Cruz necessarily have given everyone the ultimate confidence that, it's a good, in theory, partnership, good money spent on them, but the mistakes are a bit of a doubt. But I can see the trajectory here, Gab, and sometimes you've got to move forward. And all the great managers have had to rejig their teams over time. It's probably happened quicker than folk would have liked, and we haven't really had an opportunity to say goodbye. But football doesn't wait around for sentimentality, and I think a few of the fans are a bit worried about that. The slow start, I think, felt inevitable. There's a lot of just stuff hanging over the club at the moment, not least the hangover from last season. But Amari Hutchinson's departure, that dragged on far too long. Get the window done, get the international break now. 2 weeks on the training pitch with Kieran McKenna. We've got Sheffield United when we come back on the Friday night. They've not started the season particularly well either. But I'm the one who's, I'm the one playing for patience, because nothing is won or lost in August. But the expectation is there, quite understandably. We've spent a lot of money, but I back the manager to do it, and I hope I'm proven right.
Absolutely. Rich, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast once again, and thanks for joining us.
Cheers, Gab.
Thanks. Well, there you have it. Some tough starts to the season for Ipswich, Sheffield United and Southampton. Let me know in the comments what you think about the way your team has started. And thanks for watching. And you can get subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify.